Space weather really quiets down with a spotless sun and only a wispy coronal hole to make some noise. Will emergency communications suffer? Those stories and more in the news this week. Happy New Year, everybody, and as promised, the sun has basically gone to sleep in the new year. We do have a few bright regions on the Earth-facing disk that's keeping solar flux up barely at marginal levels for amateur radio propagation, but this likely won't last. We also have a remnant of a coronal hole that's going to be moving into the Earth strike zone here in the next 3 to 4 days. It will give us a little bit of a disturbance, maybe even bring aurora down to high latitudes, but at mid-latitudes, it may be a struggle. Let's hope that it's enough of a disturbance to help boost radio propagation for you emergency responders this week, because these bright regions, they ain't cutting it. Switching to your M-flare threat meter, you can see we are extremely low when it comes to the X-ray flux. As a matter of fact, these are some of the lowest levels we've seen in this solar cycle, which is expected. Again, we are approaching solar minimum. So this is good news for you GPS operators and satellite phone operators. This is bad news, though, for you amateur radio operators. I know you're groaning again. Unfortunately, this condition will last easily for the next 2 weeks. Switching to our solar storm conditions, you can see the last time we actually reached storm levels was back around the 17th of December. Since then, we've been going to pretty much unsettled conditions. We did bump up to active conditions for a short while just before the new year, but it didn't last. And this is from the fast wind from these shrinking coronal holes. And as we approach solar minimum, this is pretty much the story. The windows of opportunity to get aurora are beginning to shrink themselves, so we're going to have to be on our toes. But the next time we get a chance will be in about 3 to 4 days when that another remnant of that coronal hole rotates into the Earth strike zone. And although the storms over the holidays have not been all that intense, we still got some beautiful views of aurora all over the world. Like this in Finland and in Russia. It was seen in Norway and in Sweden, in Scotland, and over the pond, it was seen in Saskatchewan, in Alaska, and even down under in New Zealand. So what else does the sun have in store for us this week? Well, this is stereo A. It's our backside monitor. You can see here's Earth, here's the sun, and here's stereo A staring at the sun from behind. And what you can see on the backside is it's not that much different from what the front side looks right now. We don't have a lot of bright regions, so the solar flux will remain incredibly low. This is bad news for you emergency responders, especially those working with HF radio. We don't have a lot of solar flux that are going to support radio propagation, so we're likely going to be dipping back down into poor conditions. Then one good thing about the backside is that you do see some coronal holes that will be sending us some more fast wind here over the next few weeks, and that's giving us bigger chances for solar storms, some more aurora, and also a chance to kind of disturb that upper atmosphere to help boost propagation. Switching to your solar storm conditions and aurora possibilities over the coming week, we aren't anticipating any big storms anytime soon. So at high latitudes, NOAA's expecting unsettled conditions with a tiny chance of a minor storm, but most likely active conditions throughout the week. At mid-latitudes, we're actually expecting unsettled to even normal conditions. Things are getting very, very quiet, especially at mid-latitudes. But at the end of this week, at the beginning of next week, we might see some fast wind from that remnant of a coronal hole. It's not expected to give us a big storm, but it might bump us back up into unsettled conditions. So your aurora photographers, you might want to kind of keep your batteries charged. Switching to your solar flare and particle radiation storm outlook over the coming week, this is where we get into the bad news. We have a spotless sun right now, which means we have no threat for solar flares or radio blackouts, and that's good news for you GPS users and you satellite phone operators. However, no active regions also means we have very little solar flux on the Earth-facing disk, and that's bad news for you amateur radio operators and you emergency responders who rely on HF radio. It looks like we are going to dip into poor propagation here at the beginning of next week, and taking a look at the backside of the sun, it looks like these conditions are going to continue for easily the next 2 weeks. So the space weather this week is going to be pretty quiet. We have a few bright regions on the Earth-facing sun right now, but it's not enough to keep the solar flux up. And this is bad news for you amateur radio operators and emergency responders as radio propagation dips down into the poor conditions. So CW is most likely going to be the phrase of the day. However, this is good news for you GPS operators and satellite phone users. You're probably loving life with really good conditions right now. And as far as you Aurora photographers are concerned, you're pretty much on standby. We've got a remnant of a coronal hole that's going to be rotating into the Earth strike zone here in the next couple days, and maybe it's going to send us enough fast wind to give us a decent aurora show, but it's kind of hard to tell as these coronal holes begin to shrink. But you know what? They may be shrinking, but they're not gone yet. I'm Tamitha Skov. Thank you for watching.